2, 1. I'm going to do 3 really simple things in this debate. Firstly, I'll characterize what the narrative looks like and who talks about it and who discusses it. Second, like how does it get into children's minds. Secondly, why we think that it's a necessary form of motivation. And then thirdly, and why geniuses are unique role models. Really quick characterization setup. What does this look like? It looks like parents telling their children about the stories of the big geniuses. It looks like TV series, like entertainment, discussing the stories of these geniuses when trying to discuss science as something that you should inspire towards and that you should do, and when trying to discuss the stories of these things. Don't think that that much more characterization has to be done there. Let's get to the first thing I'm going to do in this speech, which is where does the narrative come from, and why do we think that the sources that deploy it want to overall create a good narrative and inspire people to go into science. Note that this is going to be relevant to both of my arguments. The first is going to be on approachability and humanization, and then the secondly is going to be on role models and why we want children to aspire to be these geniuses. Great, let's discuss why we think that this is generally going to be portrayed pretty well. The first is in publishing and advertising, right? Because we think that 2 things are going to be what guides most people when they try to discuss these topics with children or with whoever else consumes this narrative. The first is the just basic idea of social function, that we want to motivate individuals to do good and to do science and to be motivated. This means that we understand if we are being unapproachable to children and if we portray a narrative that is that creates this superhuman perception of these children, this is going to be something that is very unapproachable to individuals. So we will always try to focus on the mistakes that they're made, on the humanizing process that's part of the way, and on the many types of intelligence that people can have that will lead them to personal, being a genius, right? Secondly, because we think that the source of that by the fact that they succeeded, they probably that what led them to become so successful was 2 things. First, you cannot separate the mistakes in the human part of their journey from their successes, right? Anytime that they want to discuss a story of a researcher or of a scientist or of a genius in full, I'm always going to have to disclose the problems and the things that they faced in life. This is what makes for a compelling story, which means that when I'm discussing the story of these individuals, these are always the things that I will have to cover. But the second thing to note here is that they're probably good role models and good people to aspire to if they've got into the position that they were, right? If they led a really destructive lifestyle, or if they were really not good in committing to the scientific discipline that they wanted to do, or if they were really good scientists with really bad individuals, they probably wouldn't have been romanticized, and it wouldn't have been in the interest of parents or of corporations or of whoever it is that tells their story to portray them in a good light and to portray them specifically. Even if there are certain bad examples, we think that you can always choose and pick the good cherries from the bad ones, which will mean that these are always the ones that you want to talk to your children about. With that out of the way, why do you think that in terms of approachability and humanization, role models are much, much better than the comparative? Let's for a second be clear on what the comparative is, right? What oppositions have to stand for in this debate is portraying a non-individualistic perspective of what success looks like, right? So you cannot discuss the fact that certain geniuses or certain successful people got to the top and to where they are, because if you would have no individuals to focus on, right? We think that being a genius means that you have higher capacities, only then can you focus on the individuals that reach the highest ranks of society. This means that they have to discuss an abstract perception of society as being successful, or of certain individuals within society, of the average Joe being able to be successful, which we think is just going to be an unrealistic representation of what success looks like and of what success looks like. Great, let's discuss why we think that being a genius is always going to create more motivation and be more humanizing. Let's take CO4 before.
All of your analysis on why they should be seen as relatable and human is just an upcase disguised as framing. You can't run away from your burden through a mechanism. You need to defend geniuses.
What? Sorry, I think that we can create the perception that individuals that have a lot of intelligence have intelligence within specific disciplines, and that they are human just like anybody else. Being a genius means that you are more competent and more intelligent than certain other people in certain fields. I have no idea why that is escaping the motion. Great, let's discuss motivation. Why do you think that geniuses are uniquely motivating in that way? The first is because the achievements that they get to are always going to be bigger than the one of the average Joe, right? If you portray an individual and a genius as being the one that leads a scientific breakthrough, this is always going to mean that the person receiving that can have an idea of self-worth and an idea of what they can achieve in life that is always much, much bigger. Compare this when you romanticize the average Joe that doesn't amount to that much, that doesn't have that many capabilities to carry them through, or to society in which there is never one individual that gains the benefit and that gains these romanticization, whatever. We think that for that reason, individuals will always aspire for this success and this romantic perception of what their life could be when they become geniuses for that reason. But secondly, because we think that this is not the right page. Secondly, because we think that in terms of optimism bias, people will always perceive themselves as people who can become geniuses, right? This is A, because you think of yourself as someone who is really intelligent in certain things, right? You always perceive yourself as being of more value than other individuals. But secondly, because note that you always perceive yourself in relative terms. You always perceive yourself in the context of the community that you were born into, the family that you were born into, the things that interest you and that you're good at. For that reason, you're always going to think more of yourself within these contexts. You're always going to, throughout life, pick and become part of the context in which you're most successful, which will probably grant you the perception that you are some form of genius or some form of very, very capable person within that context. Great. Why do you think that that's so good? Beforehand, do I have something on personal capacity? Oh yeah, quickly on personal capacity. No, I said that already. This is a little messy. Great, let's do impacting. We just think that in terms of people wanting to get into the field, the fact that they perceive success as being something that is much more concrete to the individual rather than to society means that they will have much more motivation that carries them throughout the field. But secondly, because note that this means they develop a resistance to other individuals as part of their field that are more capable than them. Because they're always able to think, I will become the genius, and they're always able to perceive themselves and already prepare themselves as part of this narrative to being individuals that are more capable and perceiving themselves as being those geniuses. That is to say, opposition's arguments on feeling bad because these geniuses are unapproachable is something that you would face at some point anyway. You will always perceive that more people are better than you on both sides of the house. For that reason, it's better for you to prepare for that early and to perceive yourself as someone who is also more capable, which these narratives lead you to. But the second and last thing, and let's just impact motivation, right? We think that this just means more social productivity and carrying you through in what you can actually gain. So staying longer hours in the office as a doctor and taking care of your patients. This means more social utility as well as individual utility when you feel a lot of fulfillment as part of that. And then, let's do role models quickly and then we build if you want to. Why do you think that this is crucial? Because we think that A, just in terms of self-legitimization, you would think that getting bullied for who you are means that there is less, that's bad, and we think that there is more, fine, I'm gonna stop. Great speech, thank you.
I think that's bigger for everyone with the speech, so I'm going to take a few more seconds for my notes.
זה ממש לא היה, לא שמתי לב אפילו שהוא נשמע.
אני יודעת, אנחנו נדבר ואנחנו נדבר כאן ממה הוא הזמן מזמן.
מה? זה היה שנה.
Okay, I think the speakers are ready for speech. And I'm having called on the leader of opposition. הלוואי שהייתי גאון.
כולנו.
סתם, נכון, אני מתחברת לשבוע שבו כל הנושאים שנשאלו, זה הרבה טריגרים הולכת לבוא.
I work in the private sector.
No, I don't. אין פה מספיק מקום. שנייה. אני נכנע לזים, אני מצטערת.
אני מתנצל על
אני הולכת במקום לדבר. אוקיי? אני יכולה לרדת? וואו, אוקיי. קול. רגע, בואי נבדל שאני שמה פה. עידו תחתוך את כל זה.
עידו זה החלק הכי טוב בנאום. אוקיי, סבבה. לאן זה? מקליטים את זה כאילו, זה עולה ליוטיוב בדרך כלל, זה ערוץ שאני הבאת לקטע הישראלית.
How old are you?
I can't give consent. That's excellent. Can you not upload the speech?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1, go.
Look, first of all, I'm going to deal with a little bit weird, the speech that we just performed. But then I'm going to actually explain to you what is the comparative in our world and how does the narrative is already existing today in our world. You will hear it later, but then I'm also going to explain to why in the comparative, our narrative is going to create more funding for science, more more people that are getting into science and sticking in it for the time, and more collaboration and effort by the scientists in the science world. Naomi will wear this because this is her part in the team. This will be fun. Let's start with the narrative, okay? Because what does Amitai does? Oh, every child sits with his parent and hears stories about the great scientists, and then they tell you the story. We just don't think this is the way that most people are getting their idea about science, okay? I think most people are likely to hear about the great scientists in like TV, popular shows, stuff like that. Hear about Newton or Marie Curie and stuff like that. And then the question is, how are they portrayed in this media? Are they portrayed as genius, so someone that is better than everybody else and have a unique character that he has been born with, and have succeeded only because of his unique character as a genius and because he was that smart, or in the comparative in our world by someone which might not be that smart, might not have this unique ability, but have worked really hard and collaborate with other people and ask questions and like that, and succeeded by that. Why do you think that? Yes. Why do you think that our narrative? Why do you think that this is are the more likely narratives? A, just because what is like a genius, okay? Genius is by definition have to be someone who is better than everybody else, so because of that it's likely to be portrayed as someone that have a unique ability. And you don't want to tell the stories about his failure and stuff like that. But second of all, in our world, you can still get all the benefits of showing an interesting story and stuff like that, and having a cool stuff in media. You just need to put the focus in different places. I think this is good for a few reasons, and yeah, this is all the advantage that I have. Let's go into my positive case. Okay, so this is good for all the things that I talk about, for the four mechanisms that I talk about. Let's start talking about this. Okay, so how this narrative affect the science world and why it's going to make it better tomorrow? Let's first talk about funding. Okay. Notice that all, like we just spent emotion about that, all scientists need a lot of funding, okay? They need the ability to do a lot of experience, and when they continue doing it, and like they might have some kind of external factor that might have made them fail. I think that in government world we get less funding from two main reasons. Wait, sorry, I have no idea what they wrote here. Yeah, okay. So I think that when people are giving the funding, they are more to look on the person and his personality and not actually the research and what they are proposing. Why? Because now they know that if you want to create this very huge change and actually be famous and create this change in the world, you need someone who is a genius, because only he is going to create a breakthrough. That means even if you have a great methodology, a lot of equipment and good researchers, you still might not get this funding because people will think that you are not a genius. Maybe you have failed a few tests in your first year. Maybe you have not been and stuff like that, and that means you're not getting less funding to those specific things. Also, it means when people are already failing, you're less likely to get more funding. Why? Because when you portray this unit as someone who's very successful and super smart and never failed, you are less likely to be able to give continuing funding when experience fails, and what can we do? Almost all experience fail in some way. You're also more likely to lose the trust in the person when he is failing and he cannot understand why has he failed, because he's not smart enough, he doesn't understand why he's failing, maybe he's not a genius. Yeah, very quickly. Okay, and now let's talk about the people. The people are the second most, or maybe even the first most important thing in the research world, and in order to create breakthrough, because when you don't have people that are actually researching, nobody is asking the question, and nobody is creating new discovery and stuff like that. Why are we getting less people entering the field in our world? So in order to get into science, you need to hear it probably in pop culture. You need to decide this is something that you want to do, and understanding is something that's very important, but you also need to believe that you're going to create a breakthrough and be successful. Why? A, because this is what people want to do. They want to make sure they have meaning in the world and stuff like that. But second, this is also the way to make sure that you're going to earn money, okay? If you're just a mediocre scientist, you're not going to get a lot of money, so you want to believe that you're going to have the great new discovery. Why is that crucially important? Because in government world, you believe that you need to be a genius in order to create this breakthrough, okay? And I want to okay. And I think this is problematic because it just creates less incentive to people to get into science. Why? Because first of all, you just don't believe opening government tells, most people think they can become geniuses or are geniuses today. This is just a lie. You cannot become a genius because genius are inherently something to have been born. But we also think that in many cases, in many cases, people get filled with forms of surrounding and forms of society. They are not geniuses. Maybe they have not been the smartest people in the class. Maybe they have failed specific classes and stuff like that. And when you think about a genius, you're likely to think about someone who is super successful and stuff like that. That means a lot of people specifically believe they are not geniuses. This is specifically true for women, which are more likely to be told by society they are not likely to become genius, because genius is a more masculine stuff. We also think that you might be afraid from like other stigmas that come with the word genius, so it's going to want you to run away from this idea and not be portrayed as genius, and because of that you are not entering this field with the word. Before we continue, let's see.
Honest question. Do you think Einstein was just a normal guy, or do you think he had above average intelligence?
No, we don't need to defend only average intelligence. We can say, oh, those are smart people, but in order to create a breakthrough, they had to work a lot of time. Einstein also had to talk to other physics and collaborate with them, and this is what we want to create in our world. Great. Yeah. Long-term staying in the field. Okay, but also to wow, at the moment you are more likely to quit, at the moment you start to fail. Okay, you are like I told you are going to fail. At the moment you don't understand something in your experience or in your classes, you're going to understand that you are not a genius, and then you believe it without you going to do a breakthrough. And then, all of my analysis before, that's maybe you're going to stay less in the science world. I think that this is the way you're losing a lot of good scientists that might have been great contribution to science, even if not breakthrough, and this is bad. Let's very quickly talk about, I think, collaboration. Okay, when do we get less collaboration in our so what? Sorry. So I think you're going to get less collaboration in our world, firstly, because you are going to ask less help, okay? And the moment you are asking help, you are basically admitting that you are not a genius. You don't know everything, you are not better than everyone, you cannot, stop talking, thank you. You cannot answer that. That means you feel pressure from society not to ask questions, not to ask for help when you are failing. But also because you believe that the only way to get to a breakthrough is by working by yourself, you are less likely to collaborate with other people. Because you are not a genius if you are collaborating with other people. And because of that, you are also less to get less collaboration. Naomi will explain your collaboration in the report and more why? You should example or what? Look,
I have been called on the Deputy Prime Minister and to continue this debate. Here. This is here, how to use it.
Of course, I'll put some people who want to see it. Did you think close in?
Okay. I will be starting my speech in 5, 3, 2, 1. Let's start with a clarification of what we need to defend and don't have to defend. This motion speaks of an existing narrative in society. We know what this narrative looks like, which also don't let them just push the, no, this has to look a certain way. We're going to give you actual examples of what this narrative looks like in society. We get to defend what that exists as also. What does opposition not have yet to do? Tell us what they want the other narrative to replace this to be. We think that they assert that, for example, the narrative that is going to replace this is a narrative of, yes, individuals do important things, but it is only through hard work. But we think that they don't get to just say that this is this over that type of thing, and we think that they have to do actual analysis as to what the likely comparative narrative is going to be. I'll get into what we think the actual other narrative that is going to replace this likely to be in a world in which this narrative had not existed. But before that, let's do a little bit the nuance of what this narrative looks like in status quo. So we tell you that it is true that, sure, the narrative is genius is whatever, but when you hear about Einstein, the story that everyone likes to tell is how he was not great at math. And when you talk about whatever the name of the guy that invented the light bulb was, you hear about the sentence of, I didn't fail 100 times, I figured out 100 ways that it doesn't work, right? We think that the narrative in the way that it exists in society is in this very nuanced way of, yes, very smart people that worked really hard and that sometimes failed and that continued at it, get to do really great things. Now let's get into what we think that the comparative, the other narrative would be, if not this. We think that, as a thing that they already give, and as a competing narrative that already exists in status quo, is that this is not an individual effort of one genius that is the driving force, but is a collective societal driving force behind breakthroughs, and it's just like we advanced through time, had stuff, this is not one person to be thanked for, and we think that this is already a thing that exists, and also they want to talk about, when they talk about about cooperation. Uniquely then, what this means is that this strengthen our current material about why we need to have this one head figure, because in the comparative, no one feels like they can do anything, and this is going to lead me directly into the direct rebuttal to what we get from Owen. So we get this oh no, people would not go into science because they think you have to be a genius to go into science. We already discussed the thing about encouraging hard work that is just an inherent part of the way that narrative looks like in status quo. But more than that, we simply think that we are significantly less likely to have people go into science on their side of the house because of just general science is huge and scary, and you feel like you may not make a big splash, especially if we're talking about people that have failed in school, whatever, don't feel like they're particularly very smart. And we think that only on our side uniquely is the side that tells you as one individual can do something really meaningful. We think that is the importance of this type of narrative. We think that people that go into science and don't yet know a lot about science, and notice this is specifically why our material about kids is important here, because this type of very simple narrative is specifically when it is used, is when I can know that yes, I as an individual might get recognition, I as an individual can do something really huge. We think that other fields have these types of role models. When you look at specific people in a sports team, this person is amazing, and that is the type of thing that is inspiring people to go into sports, even if they themselves are not going to be the next Ronaldo, right? But so we think that we specifically need these types of role models inside of science to convince people to go into those. I'm going to add nuance as to why later on in life, when you actually go into science, you understand that the narrative is a little bit simplistic and there is a little bit more to it. And we don't think actual scientists are getting discouraged to do collaboration just because someone told them about Newton in school once. But before I do that, I'll take a closing.
Yeah, so none of this house regrets or a debate where one side is the status quo. Both narratives exist to a degree in the status quo. We are supporting one side, and you're supporting one part of that narrative. Not everything that exists today falls to your side.
Okay, we're saying that we support the narrative of geniuses. I've explained to you what the narrative of geniuses are their driving force looks like. We think that that does good things. Cool, moving on. Let's talk about that type of nuance, because we think that our material is uniquely this type of narrative is a thing that affects people that are not actively doing science right now. So this either talks about the general public in the type of inspiration that we told you about in first speech of there is desperation, people don't feel like they can do meaningful things in the world. There is a collective action problem inside of here of if the computing narrative is oh, we did this together as a society, then no one themselves think of, I want to go into this really hard career of stuff that I don't understand because what is the meaning of me specifically being an extra person in science, right? But at the point at which someone is already within science, we think that it is very clear that they understand that this narrative is slightly simplistic and they have other goals, and their goal is not just to be remembered as a genius. At the point at which you've this narrative has opted you in school to yes, Newton is really cool, Marie Curie is really cool, which by the way, feminist icon, great. We do have those types of things as well. This has convinced me to go into science. I've started investing my time. I've started doing a lot of hard work like my idols have, right? And then at the point at which I've gotten to university, I already have a much more diverse view of the scientific world. I know of other slightly less known role models. I know of specific niches within science that I can excel at without being the perfect genius. I've actually done some work, and I know that collaboration is important within science. We think that at that point, yes, we have that more nuanced view, and the narrative is not going to be the main thing dictating how you live your career. Cool. Let's move on to lastly, we want to say, why do we specifically need that geniuses, this is not the average show? We think that specifically, yes, uniquely, even if the alternative narrative that they want to run with is this is just a person that has worked hard, this is a person that also can be just had luck and managed to stumble upon something. We uniquely want you to aim to be as good as those geniuses. We uniquely want to push kids in school to romanticize the act of doing homework and working hard and yay, amazing, I failed once, but this person has also, and they have also succeeded. We uniquely need people to compare themselves, yes, to those geniuses, to push themselves to do those types of things, because we think that we get significantly more meaningful engagement with science on our side of the house. Let's do preemptive weighing. Why does this wisdom? We think that the point at which that you've already opted in to science, your behavior is going to be significantly more determined by the environment that you live in, and specifically is going to not be very affected by this narrative. what does then we get on our side of the house? We tell you that we have more people opting into science in the first place. Specifically, we tell you we have the younger, the people of younger age being willing to put actual time into this and opting into this at a younger point in time. At that point, we tell you that the most delta is on where do we inspire more people to do more meaningful things. We win the debate. Beg you to oppose. No, propose. Yay. Propose! Woo!
Hi, my prediction I'm happy to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue this debate. Here
Okay, cool. Beginning my speech, and guys, also please don't talk as much as you did before because it's terrible acoustics in here. Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to engage with all this mess about narratives and what do we have to defend and what we don't have to defend, and then I'm going to explain why at the end of the day we win this debate, because we show the most innovation actually happening and the most scientific advantages, which is the most important thing in the debate, and we show that this happens because at the end of the day the most resources, both insofar as manpower and investment of time and insofar as money, actually reach people, and we are capable of achieving these goals. Let's engage with this whole narrative thing. First off, on the POI from CO, yes, we don't have to defend that average intelligence is the way research happens and that all scientists are basically your average Joe. We just have to defend that it's not geniuses. How are geniuses different from everyone in this room? I think we all agree that this room probably represents above average intelligence. It doesn't necessarily represent 10 geniuses. The reason geniuses are extremely unique and extremely rare. It is the word we use to describe people of such high intelligence that most people have never even met someone this brilliant, that they only happen a few times in a generation, and that they are basically almost inhuman in their abilities. This is not the vast majority of scientists and people who are making advances in our world today. Why? Because there are millions of people who are making advances in the world today. If they were all geniuses, geniuses would no longer be rare, would no longer be special, would no longer even meet that definition. Just sit down. Now, I think that then we're told what this narrative looks like, and first we're told that these are good people. I genuinely don't understand why we're covering good people. Einstein was a cheater, Newton was a narcissistic maniac, Edison took advantage of hundreds of engineers. The vast majority of our narratives around geniuses are actually about assholes. Why? Because we really like the narrative in which geniuses are people who are very, very good at, say, science, but have terrible social skills and are really mean and kind of neurodivergent, and that is basically the narrative that we create. This is also why a lot of people don't perceive themselves as geniuses, because this narrative of neurodivergence is precisely a narrative that doesn't fit the average person, and is also one that is very detrimental to people cooperating and working together in science. If you think a genius is the kind of asshole who just says, oh yeah, I'm smarter than everyone in the room and I can do everything myself because I am the best, then it's exactly the type of a behavior that prevents effective research from happening, as Michal already explained. Then we're told, oh, well, film writers want some sort of, we're going to portray it that they had hardships and they were constantly failing. I don't know why that is necessarily the portrayal that we're going to receive. Here's what I think is a far more reasonable portrayal. Given that we're talking about these geniuses, and we're talking about people we want to portray as being above everybody's ability and really, really incredible, we don't want them portrayed as people who make the same mistakes as you and I, and it's more likely that when in these narratives, external conflicts are put into the film. What does this mean? It means the director that doesn't believe in them and tells them that they aren't, that they don't want to fund their research. Or it means the people who don't get that they're neurodivergent and when they say mean things, it's not their fault that they don't understand social norms. It's the person not wanting to fund Stephen Hawking because he's in a wheelchair. Those are the sorts of conflicts that generally appear in these sorts of narratives. We think that the narrative, and yes, we do get to argue that there is a reasonable comparative narrative of other kinds of research. For instance, let's talk about Hidden Figures, a film and story about scientific advancement that is all about a collective effort and about the hundreds of people that were required in order to put a man on the moon, and the hours of effort and the people who sat and did calculations by hand and had to figure things out again and again and again. These are the narratives we're defending, and these are the narratives that we think create precisely the efforts we want to see happening within the world. We're then told, oh, well, eventually people understand that this is unrealistic. A, we're talking about precisely children, we explain why, and we engage with you on why we think the vast majority just don't believe that they're geniuses. But second,
We think that also people directly outside the world of science, such as investors, such as university directors, those sorts of people who aren't actually doing the things, but do make a lot of the decisions about how resources are allocated and about how things are prioritized, don't necessarily get exposed to reality. These narratives are very powerful in the way that they view things because they are both pervasive in fiction, in non-fiction, and in the cult of personality that we create around people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs. All of these things mean that these allocation of resources happens within this mentality of we're looking for the 1 in a billion genius that exists. Now, why do we think that, why do we think that we win the debate, and what do we think we do? So we think, A, that in case anyone tries to open up a new clash, innovation is the most important thing in the debate. A, it affects the most people. Advancements in science, advancements in medicine affect everybody in the world. They allow people access to cheaper goods, better healthcare, better conditions for their lives, and they generally are accessible by everybody. Second, it's a very significant effect. These things can be life and death when they are medical advancements. They can be significant effects on your quality of life, and these things are important. Third, we think they're a unique way of solving problems. We don't have any other way of solving problems other than new inventions and new breakthroughs within science. Why do we think that at the end of the day, perseverance and cooperation are the two most important aspects in this sense? First, there's just too much existing knowledge to do it alone. We think that anyone who tries to work within this narrative of, oh, I need to show that I am a genius and that I am a unique intelligence and that I am better than everybody within my environment, the sort of person who doesn't ask for help, who doesn't try to co-research and talk with other people. The problem is there's so much previous research at this point that no single person is capable of being an expert in every field and figuring out how to advance those fields properly and how to actually make the proper advancements, and we don't think that's an efficient way for things to be happening. Yes, closing extensions.
So, if you put a child in like kitat mechoranim,
yes,
then they're much more likely to socialize with people that are similar to them and develop the ability to cooperate with them. And if you put them something where they are the smartest and therefore don't cooperate.
Okay, so again, I don't entirely understand why you think that we need the genius narrative in order to accept that there are some people who are smarter. Dividing people, I'm not going to teach you, dividing people into levels of intelligence is not the same as saying all advancements and all breakthroughs happen just through these very unique few. We think that at the end of the day, it is just not, optimism bias is not analysis of the fact that people believe that they are geniuses and believe that they are better than everybody else. There's practical proof of incapability. There's having to work hard to get good, which proves that you're not some sort of genius that gets everything immediately, and you're just not likely to think that you have potential. And if you believe that the only reason to enter science is if you're amazing at it, there is no reason for you to enter it to begin with, and no reason for you to work hard at it. Next, we think that creativity. Why is cooperation so critical? Not only because of knowledge, but also because of creativity and fresh eyes, and people actually having that idea and that aha moment. That very often happens when someone's been looking at a problem for hours and then someone else comes in and gets a chance to see it afresh. That doesn't mean they're a genius, it just means that when lots of different people look at a problem, you're far more likely to find a solution. And lastly, because science is extremely expensive, and if investors are only interested in hunting out geniuses, they all focus on few impractical ventures and create this exact gross startup heads culture, which once again benefits men and not women, so women get a disadvantage both because they're less encouraged to enter and also because they're less likely to receive funding. Please, applause. Woo!
It takes a village to raise a scientist. Unless that scientist is a genius, then he's a lone wolf. He's goodwill hunting, surrounded by thugs in South Boston and developing groundbreaking theorem at night alone. She's Matilda, abused by her ignorant family and reading everything in the library in secret. We flip everything that you just got from CG in one sentence. The moment when a person is a genius, the outside world has no impact because a genius works alone and in solitary. That is the narrative you get in society. We think it's everything from those things I just quoted. We think it's everyone who's sitting there writing a theorem on his own. We think that is the way the solitary genius is portrayed, and that is where governments in this debate fall. Two things in this speech. Number one, I'll talk to you about what's better for these geniuses, both in terms of believing in hard work and in terms of having support from their teachers, and we'll talk about the pressure they face. And after that, we'll talk about why they really aren't the driving force, and just in terms of the credit that is deserved, it is only fair to spread the credit to those who are actually part of scientific innovation. We might get a tiny bit of rebuttal, but most of it is not necessary. Let's see. Yeah, I just think, in case wasn't clear enough how we flipped it, when they tell us this whole narrative of like, oh, well sometimes the genius is envy, they're outcasts, they believe in different things, we think the narrative tells their teachers and their friends, leave them, they're going to be geniuses, they're supposed to be different, they work in another dimension. It doesn't matter if this kid doesn't do his homework because he's a genius, and it doesn't matter if he has different interests, you shouldn't help integrate him with the class because he's going to save the world. We think that is massive, massive damage that is done. Everything else will be integrated. I will try to flag when I'm directly answering something though. So let's talk about the lives of geniuses, because it works out pretty nicely that at least the short diagonal that we heard now tells us, okay, basically what matters most is innovation, which means we actually do need good scientists, which means these geniuses, who are at least a part of this process, need to be in a better state and need to be more capable of reaching these heights. So let's talk about what happens to them. Because here's what's critical. On both sides of the debate, and regardless of any narrative, a genius is a genius because it is an inborn trait, as opposed to the question of things like work ethic, hard work, how you deal with adversity, how you deal with your surroundings. Those are things that change based on a narrative. Here, we think it's critical, whether or not a person is a genius, for that person to believe that he needs hard work, he needs structure, he needs those around him. But let's be very clear on where we're different from opening government, or opening opposition, whichever side we are. Because OO talked a bit about the genius knowing or not knowing how to ask for help. But let's be very clear on his surroundings. We think that having the support of your teachers and your family is critical. And we think the narrative impacts them quite as much, and they are excited because most of the time they don't see geniuses, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I have a little brother who's a real genius. I have a kid in my class for the first time in 13 years who's an actual genius. How am I going to treat him? I am going to remember when I watched Matilda as a kid. I'm going to remember how I watched, I don't know, The Big Bang Theory, and there's this kid who just does it on his own. Whatever it is that I'm watching, not yet. We think that's how the surroundings react. We think these geniuses need support. They need people around them telling them, we are with you, we can help you, and we can help you through school. We think it's true, A, just because as a matter of fact, that's how innovations actually happen, but B, because we don't think anyone can make it through the torture of having that burden all alone. And let's talk about that burden, and this is also completely new. We think that when geniuses are told that they are responsible for scientific breakthroughs, they are the driving forces, they feel bad when they don't accomplish that. That is to say, I can go out at night, partying with friends, having no worries that people are dying of cancer because of me, because what was I supposed to do? But if I'm a doctor and someone right next to me is choking and I don't do anything, I feel bad. When I'm a genius and the world has always told me, you are the one who's going to solve global warming, it has to be a genius, and there are maybe 5 of them on the planet. If I'm not doing that right now, either because I'm focusing on developing a personal life, or because I'm trying but I haven't reached that breakthrough yet, every single day I feel crushing defeat. We think, A, this is just really important for the people who are most impacted by the motion, but B, in terms of innovation, they're much less likely to get there when they actually have to deal with that feeling every single day of crushing defeat, of not being good enough, and we think that is amplified by the motion.
On that.
We also think, in a second, we just think there's, if I don't succeed, I get quicker frustration now, I feel worse because of it. We think the genius thinks he's responsible, and best case scenario, if a genius starts to see some success, we just think they develop megalomania of, it was all because of me, because the world also told me it was always because of me. They then don't learn how they're going to handle the next challenge, because they always succeeded on their own. We think that is terrible. Now, let's take opening, yes.
Regardless of the narrative, science is a hard and frustrating field. If I never have a chance to be Billie Eilish or like the next Ronaldo, why am I sticking to it?
Why are you sticking to science? If you think only people who think they're geniuses are going to stick to science, we think you've lost the debate already. Very, very few people are actually geniuses. And no, we don't think that people after the age of 7 or 8, once they've seen one of these movies, or they've met one actual genius, or just saw that video on YouTube of Jimmy Kimmel interviewing that kid who actually knows how to do 10-digit multiplication in his head, everyone realizes they're not the genius pretty quickly. We think people will give up anyway. We think the reason people go into science is because they realize they can still contribute, which happens uniquely on our side, when people realize they are part of the contribution, and let's get to that now, right? We think that if someone told you, Hadar Goldberg only made it in debate because Tamar was her partner, and that's how they won Euros, we think that not only is it obviously missing the fact that both of them are talented, but it also doesn't allow development of each of them. So A, we think it just takes away credit, and this is already crucial, just on a fundamental level. We think we like the model, for example, the competing narrative, where a Nobel Prize is always given to 3 researchers at a time. We wish people referred to the groundbreaking paper on physics as Einstein, Rosowski, Rosen, and Patelsky, or whatever their 3 names were who actually published the paper. We think when you recognize more people are involved, obviously the genius then learns he's supposed to do it with other people, which is always good for someone, whether it's just because it's humbling or it's a new idea. But we think, more importantly, we just think that when people don't get the credit that they deserve, they become frustrated quickly. These people who are critical to it, even if they're not the one Einstein, they're the 2 people who wrote the paper with him, put in hours doing what, okay, maybe 100 people in the world could have done as opposed to 1, we think those people lose out. They're not interested in staying in science if they can't get the credit. And note, these ancillary people are critical, because the geniuses will be successful. But they will be more successful if they have the people around them. The people around them are the ones who might quit if they're told it's only geniuses. But if they are given credit as well, if they are recognized as being a part of this, so A, we just don't do them this massive injustice, but B, we also encourage those people to be a part of it. We have more role models, more people who know a friend or a cousin who was involved in this because there are more names attached to it, and just more of a feeling that we are all in this together. For all those reasons, CO.
Look, I don't know exactly what this narrative looks like, and no team knows exactly. Many teams have given different examples, and I think to an extent all of them are true and all of them are part of the narrative. I think what we can know for sure is that even if we don't know the narrative, we can know one direct implication of it, which is incredibly important. If geniuses are the core factor behind scientific development, then we as a society have an insane interest in promoting these geniuses, in making sure they have everything they need to develop correctly so that they could be the scientists that change the future and save our planet. This is why people like Or and I can go to university at the age of 15. This is why I have 3 friends who have halfway finished their PhD before they finish the age of 18. Because we as a state and we as a society put a lot of resources and a lot of effort into finding them when they are young, into sending them into special places. This is why we get people from that when I send it to Shimon time already when you are when you're in your diapers, if I'm a bit extreme. We think that this is the case that is going to win us the debate, and for this we win. So I'm going to talk about 2 things. First of all, are geniuses actually crucial to the scientific breakthroughs? And secondly, in which side of the house do we develop geniuses better? Before that, a couple of points of rebuttal to closing opposition. First of all, they say that this puts too much expectation, which means that they are going to put too much effort and stress on the geniuses, and they're not going, and therefore they're going to fail. First of all, I think a lot of them are interested in more mathematical, or more in doing a lot of what they like doing, and not partying. In my second point, I'm going to explain that they are usually a bit of a different people, but I don't understand why the fact that they work all day is so bad. Secondly, I think that this is them taking the narrative to the absolute extreme. I think you may be a genius, but it's still obvious to people that when you're 5, you're just a child and you also like to play. And when you're 16, you're also a teenager and you also like to go out sometimes. The fact that you work more doesn't mean that people are not going to let you work at all. This is like an extremely extreme case from them. Lastly, we tell you that it's obvious that even if your motivation is to succeed, taking breaks is detrimental to success. That's why we have breaks in the workplace in the first place. I think people are not stupid enough to not realize that you need to take breaks from time to time in order to succeed. The second thing they said is that you don't give credit to all of the normies that also had an influence and also deserve the credit. We think we do give them credit. just not for doing the breakthrough. We obviously give credit to every person who works in our society. We give credit to our professors. We give credit to people who work and develop things for us. We don't think that they are the geniuses, but it doesn't mean we give them no credit. And we think that most people don't even strive to be the best in society. Most people are comfortable living an average life, so we don't know why this is so important. Let's talk about whether geniuses are actually important. Both oppositions tell us that hard work and support are necessary in order to succeed. We completely agree in closing opposition. I'm going to analyze later why we get more than. But note that these are not enough. They are a necessary condition, but they are not enough. What else is needed? Two things that we have. First of all, the ability to learn quickly and get a lot of information at the same time, because most of the easy food or the low-hanging fruits have already been picked up, which means that to make advancements nowadays, you need to have an incredible amount of knowledge in your head, which means that even if you work really hard, if you can't study and learn fast enough, you won't be able to succeed. But secondly, we tell you creativity. A lot of the breakthroughs we had were completely changing everything from flipping the 180 degree on its head, which is incredibly counterintuitive to a lot of people. So we say essentially that you need to work hard, but you also need to have these specific traits which usually geniuses are the ones that possess them. I think this is usually how we define geniuses in terms of what it makes a person a genius, which means that it's not enough to have them, but all of the others are also crucial in order to make breakthroughs. Where do we as a society develop geniuses better? Opening government give you the only case of role models. They tell you you get role models and people start to be them. The problem is this is a very weak mechanism, as it is a message case and there is a lot of burdens. How are those role models going to perceive? How does this play in the child's head? Why is it going to motivate them to action at the end of the day? Which we don't need them to completely fulfill, which means that the probability of their case is rather low. On the comparative, our case is a lot more persuasive, and talk about the entire support system that now we as a society instill. Ortel gives you a number of things here. The first of all is learning facility, that from a very young age, you get the best teachers, you get more complex material, you get specialized subjects, and therefore you teach their brain to engage and develop better from a very, very young age. The second point, which is also going to engage with a lot of what we have from the opposition, is the ability to develop socially better. Or give you a number of reasons why in normal circumstances they are often excluded and left out from social. Because people are envious of them because everything goes so easy for them. Because they have different interests. They're usually interested in different things. And because they are often neurodivergent, as say, we agree, which means that people are often don't have the social skills. When we put them with people that are like them and in specialized places that are like them, then that's where they can develop socially. That's when they can be next to people that are like them and that are not jealous. That's when you are aware that you are not the smartest person in the world. That's where you get positive reinforcement and not people only excluding you from society and telling you that what you have is bad. Before I show how this flips all of the cases from open opposition, I'll take them.
The institution we're standing in is responsible for millions of patents from thousands of labs, as is every major university in Israel. Has every genius in the world somehow ended up here, or maybe is genius not critical to the innovation and advancement of society?
Obviously you can get innovation. The question in this debate is breakthroughs. I think that breakthroughs are incredibly important. Like the fact that Einstein invented the general theory of relativity allows us to have satellites today. The fact that Turing made a breakthrough in computer science, that it was absolutely no other version, means that we have computers today and we can save millions and millions of lives. You have a lot of breakthroughs in biology that are crucial for us to be able to make progress in society. Okay. Why does this flip the case of the open opposition? Because we say that you teach them to collaborate from a very young age. When you put them together next to each other, then they learn that they can collaborate with people that are similar to them. They are not the smartest person in the world. On the comparative, when they remain in the same place and people don't put the effort in them, that's the time where they develop those feelings of superiority. That's the time where they think, oh, everybody around me is just stupid. I don't need to collaborate. And therefore, we flip them. Secondly, this also teaches them to put a lot of effort and hard work, because that are the places in society where with this narrative, we push them to make hard work in the classes that they have, which is why they get the perseverance. Why is this the most important and this wins us the round? Because we say that your development as a child is the most crucial to how you're going to be as an adult. That's when your brain is the most flexible, where people can easily learn new languages. That's where you learn habits that are going to stay with you for the rest of your life. If we don't develop them as children, and only outside you develop them as children, they're not going to fulfill their potential. For all of these reasons, we get much better scientists. Propose.